Raw and the police were letting it happen. Had I not acted, I am confident that my friend and I'm sure I would have been killed because I wasn't going to stand there and let something happen.
A protester linked to Saturday's shooting in Portland speaks to us about what happened that night. To be clear, he hasn't been arrested or charged. We didn't go looking for him, and we have no information on where he is now. He went to a freelance journalist, Donovan Farley, who brought it to us. We then sent a freelance filmmaker to tape the sit-down. Tess Owen has been covering extremism at Vice News, and she's here to help us get a handle on this. Tess, do we know anything about this guy, and why is he talking to us?
His name is Michael Reinoehl, and so far, Portland police have been pretty tight-lipped about what actually happened on Saturday night. The victim's been described as a supporter of Patriot Prayer, which is a far-right group in the area. One night after the shooting, Reinoehl's name began circulating on 4chan as a possible suspect, and then his name went into social media and right-wing blogs, and then local media citing police sources have since described him as a person of interest in the shooting. And conservative media have also honed in on his own social media posts, where he's described himself as 100% Antifa. And Trump has shared that tweet saying that the victim was murdered in Portland by Antifa.
So you've been covering this story from the beginning. What have you found about what happened that night?
So on August 29th, there was this pro-Trump caravan that started in a town about 10 miles southeast of Portland. Portland police knew about the caravan and had apparently been tasked with making sure that it stayed out of downtown Portland to avoid escalating tensions, which there have been running pretty high, more than 90 days of consecutive protests. And still, some parts of the caravan peeled off and made their way into downtown Portland to confront protesters. And then the evening or hours later, the shooting took place.
So Tess, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Why were pro-Trump supporters there in a caravan? And why was someone protesting against police violence bringing a gun to a protest?
So I think it's important to look at the shooting in the context of escalating violence in Portland, which has been an ideological battlefield since 2016. In recent years, there have been numerous street brawls between anti-fascist and far-right groups like Patriot Prayer and Proud Boys. Some of these have resulted in arrests and quite serious injuries. And in 2018, a group of far-right demonstrators were found with a whole bunch of long guns on a roof overlooking a protest. And then this summer, things have got messier and bloodier. And, Reinoehl's been mixed up in all this too. He got shot in the arm when he tried to pull a gun away from someone during a scuffle in Portland in late July. Earlier that month, he'd been arrested for having a loaded gun at a protest and interfering with police. Those charges were dropped. And then in August, a conservative protester was arrested for allegedly firing at a group of Black Lives Matter protesters. And there was a Proud Boy who was seen brandishing a gun and pointing at protesters.
Tess Owen, thanks for that background. Stay with us. Okay, so here's the exclusive, but first a note. We don't want to share this to glorify or excuse what he says he did, but we do think it's newsworthy because the United States is being racked by political violence right now. Why people are taking guns into the street and using them, why people are scared, and why they're fighting is integral to understanding what's going on.
I had no choice. I mean, I had a choice. I could have sat there and watched them kill a friend of mine of color. But I wasn't going to do that. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. My name's Michael Forrest Reinoehl, born and raised Portland, Oregon, 48 years old. Lots of lawyers suggest that I shouldn't even be saying anything, but I feel it's important that the world at least gets a little bit of what's really going on because there's been a lot of propaganda put out there. What I will say is that I felt that my life and other people around me's lives were in danger. And I felt like I had no choice but to do what I did. I wasn't even aware of what was going on. I was actually out with my son. We were driving through town and we happened to see hundreds of trucks with flags on them. And so I notified my friends of what I'd seen and finished what I was doing with my son, got home, and then received a phone call saying that it might be a good idea to come down there. Security may be needed. Not knowing what that would entail, I had no idea what I was going into. I used to really love this country, and I respected the flag and everything that it represented. But because of all this, every time I see a big truck, especially with a flag on it, I immediately think that they're out to get me. There were 600 vehicles. Who knows how many were rolling through downtown, but like I said, when I showed up, I saw more of their vehicles than real citizen vehicles. It felt like the beginning of a war. It was a free-for-all, and the police were letting it happen.
Right after it happened, what did you panic? Did you run?
Well, honestly, you know, those are a bit of details I probably don't want to get into, other than just simply saying that, you know, I realized what had happened. I was confident that I did not hit anyone innocent, and I made my exit.
You okay? Jay!
And just to reiterate, you feel that it was totally justified?
Totally justified. Had I not acted, I am confident that my friend and I'm sure I would have been killed, because I wasn't going to stand there and let something happen. What they've done is they're trying to make it look like we're all terrorists, and they're trying to make me look like a murderer. I've noticed that they keep saying that it's not clear that it's related to the protests. That's a lie. They know that it's related to the protests. Not to mention the fact that they say that they don't know who it was. That's a lie. Within an hour, Facebook and Twitter and all that have my face and name labeled as the shooter. They want to paint a picture of Antifa having major involvement. A lot of people don't understand what Antifa represents. And if you just look at the basic definition of it, it's just anti-fascist. And I am 100% anti-fascist. I'm not a member of Antifa. I'm not a member of anything. Honestly, I hate to say it, but I see a civil war right around the corner. That shot felt like the beginning of a war.
We just heard from a man who all but admits he killed someone at the protest in Portland this Saturday. The latest awful thing to happen in the name of making this country better. Vice News has been covering the rise in extremism around the world, from embedding with ISIS to driving around Charlottesville with the dudes behind the Unite the Right rally. Tess Owen, who most recently got access to the Boogaloo Boys, is back for more. Tess, stupid question, why are people showing up to protests with guns?
I mean, guns might not be that unusual at, say, like a Second Amendment rally in the South. You'd expect to see guns there, maybe. But there has been a creeping uptick of people bringing guns to protests in the last few months, especially, where there's been this really troubling surge. And, you know, while the majority of guns I've been seeing so far tend to be, you know, among like right-leaning militias or libertarian Boogaloo Boys or vigilantes, there are also guns on the left as well, increasingly. You know, there's left-wing militias, there's anti-fascist militias, there's Black Power militias. And I think that, you know, when you bring all these ideological opposing groups together and a lot of them have guns, that's what's quite troubling.
So people are bringing guns, and both sides say they're victims of something spiraling out of control. What's the reality check on that?
So, for example, in the Kenosha shooting in Wisconsin, the alleged shooter, who's 17 years old, said that he brought a gun to the protest because he was defending businesses from protesters. And Reinoehl, for his part, said that he was armed that night to provide security to protesters. So, you know, in some ways, there is this like vigilanteism that's happening. And that's one way to explain why people are bringing guns. And they see themselves as a sort of intermediary for law enforcement.
Right. But well, let's talk about that 17-year-old, because he's been charged with murder. Do you think that's enough to stop the next protest shooting?
Yeah, so I think for many of the people who reported on this beat, of extremism and watched the intensification that's happened over these last few months. We're sadly not that surprised about what's happened in Kenosha and Portland, but one thing that I was very taken aback by and shocked was the way that, after Kenosha, the alleged shooter has been turned into a sort of folk hero by the right. And it's not just the fringe right, it's Tucker Carlson on Fox News who's been defending him, and politicians like Paul Gosar who've come to his defense. And I think that's a really, really troubling and quite strange development. And the worst thing that can happen is the right and left get into this tit for tat situation. And so I'm hoping these two very horrible incidents get people to step back for a little bit.
What do you mean by folk hero? What does that mean?
He's got money pouring in to pay his legal bills. There's the Fight Back Foundation, which said earlier this week it had raised $650,000, even more than that. And his lawyers have done Tucker Carlson and have tried to frame him as this hero, part of a constitutional militia, and say that, he has every right to defend himself.
Thank you for your reporting, Tess. You can read more of her work on vicenews.com.